We'll do that. Okay, I think we're good. All right. So, hey everybody, thanks for coming to the OU College of Medicine Rev-Up Student Mentor Q&A panel. Try saying that 5 times fast. Today we are joined by some lovely med student mentors here. I'll let them introduce themselves here in a bit. We're going to talk about AMCAS, how to apply, how to navigate the whole system, and some things that we thought were helpful as we kind of were on our way, our journey to medical school. Quick intro for me, I'm Eric. I'm a third year here. I went to University of Tulsa and I'm going to be applying anesthesiology. And I am really involved in Rev-Up, trying to kind of further expand our mentorship program. So if there's any questions about, connecting your school with resources here at OU, I'd be happy to do that. And I'll share a lot of advice here today too. So first things first, I'd like for our panelists to go ahead and say hi, introduce themselves. If you guys want, it could be whoever wants to go first. I was thinking name, undergrad, what year right now, and then maybe like intended specialty if you know.
Hey, I can go first. My name is Evan Mooney. I went to OU a couple of times, and initially from a really small town. So if anyone's coming from a real small town, feel free to ask any questions about how you can try and work that into getting into medical school. I am a third year currently, planning to apply into neurology.
I guess I can go next. My name is Stephen Jean. I did undergrad at OU, and I'm a third year med student at OU now. I'm applying to emergency medicine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Clapp. I'm also a third year, and I'm going to be applying internal medicine. And then for undergrad, I went to Oklahoma State.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isha. I am a second year student, and I went to undergrad at OU Norman, and I majored in chemical biosciences. I don't know my intended specialty just yet.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I am a second year medical student. I went to OSU for undergrad, majored in physiology, and I am planning on applying to psychiatry, and I'm interested in academic medicine and research.
Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm a first year medical student. I went to the University of Oklahoma for undergrad, and I do not know what I want to do.
All right. Hi, y'all. I'm Spencer Oslin. I went to University of Oklahoma for undergrad. I'm also undecided for what I want to do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon. I'm a first year medical student, and I also went to OU. My degree was in biology, and I'm also undecided.
Hey y'all, I'm Tyler. I'm from Choctaw, but I went out of state for undergrad to Louisiana. I'm a first year and I have no idea what I want to do yet.
Hi everybody, my name is Wee Non. I am a first year med student. I've spent a lot of years at OU, and right now I'm thinking anesthesia.
Hey guys, I'm Emma. I'm also a first year. I went to Oklahoma Baptist for undergrad and majored in biochem, and I'm interested in anesthesiology, but I don't really know yet. So.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael, also a first year medical student. I went to OU and majored in biomedical engineering. Right now, I guess I'm thinking psychiatry, but that could definitely change because I'm only first year. So.
All right. Is there anybody else? Did we miss anybody? There's actually more panelists than I anticipated there being. So that's awesome. You guys are, here to help out other students. That's great. Also, it was interesting to see that a lot of people are still undecided. And I think that is extremely common. And it's like, sort of like undergrad in a way, where a lot of people will go in, having one idea or you're not fully sure, and then you kind of figure it out over time. I will say completely unbiased, anesthesia is the way to go. Okay, so how I'd like for this to kind of go, I made this presentation. The presentation is kind of just a backdrop. Obviously, this is a Q&A panel, so students, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I've kind of broken it up to where we're going to touch on different topics as we go. So we'll talk about MCAT, we'll talk about all the various parts of AMCAS, we'll talk about interviews, we'll do all of that. So if you want, you can drop your questions now, or preferably you can wait until we get to that, and then while we're all kind of on that topic, we can address it then. But first I wanted to start with sort of a general admissions timeline. I stole this straight from Kaplan. I didn't make it myself, that's why it looks nice. But ideally, first step is obviously taking the MCAT. The purple here is kind of the ideal time to take it. So right now in April would be good. I remember taking mine like May 15th or so. But you could take it, you know, all the way until like September. I like these bars because they tell you different options. But we'll talk more about what we did and what worked for us. Then we'll go into AMCAS itself with these primary applications, and then secondary applications, which is just tons and tons of essays, and then interviews and other stuff like that. So first thing we're going to talk about is the MCAT. So I'll just give a quick little intro about that, and then we'll open it up to our panelists to talk about it more. So the MCAT, it's a huge test. It takes like 7 hours. There are 4 sections to it. First one is bio and biochem, then chemistry and physics, and then psych-soc, and then critical analysis and reading skills, or CARS. Oh boy, CARS. CARS is fun. So all those are kind of different. A lot of it you can tell is sort of your basic sciences that you're taking in undergrad, all your pre-med coursework. When to take it, we've kind of said that up top. You can see there's like an ideal time, but then there's also a time outside of that. And then there's a lot of ways to prep for it. There's tons of ways you can do it. There's lots of programs, there's lots of flashcards, things online. And then scores we'll get into as well. So right now, students, if there are any questions about the MCAT, feel free to unmute and ask that, or you can post it in the chat and I can kind of read those off too. If not, panelists, feel free to, if anybody just wants to talk about the MCAT, go for it. I was thinking we could maybe start with when you took the MCAT and if you thought that was a good time.
I can start us out. I believe I took the MCAT in April of my junior year. I think that was a good time for me personally, just because of the classes I was taking. It allowed me to have like study time during that semester before April. And then it also gave me plenty of time to retake it if I didn't like my score. And then just a general advice tip on studying, I would say the time I saw like the most substantial amount of growth was when I was taking practice tests. So going back, I probably would have started taking those earlier and taken more of them because that's when my scores like definitely changed a lot more, was with practice tests.
So it's been a minute since I took the MCAT. I remember it fondly because it's one of those things that kind of sticks with you. I took mine in May. I had originally scheduled it for April. I was actually working at the time, so I had most of my evenings free, just knock everything out. May was a pretty good time. I felt like I had plenty of time to study. I think Jessica's completely right. Practice tests and just practice questions in general are probably one of the best ways to learn anything. If you get it wrong, that's fine. Don't stress about it. It just means that you've learned something that day and that you won't get it wrong the next time. So if you're getting poor scores, don't worry about it. I think another thing that got me, one of my first degree was in psychology, and I was doing really well on psychology and all the practice tests. So I started sleeping on psychology in a big way and focusing on on the other ones. And my score came out. I did so much better on all the other subjects except psychology because I had just kind of slept on it and I got a little rusty. So if you are doing consistently well in a particular subject, you can kind of maybe you can give it a little less attention, but don't completely ignore it going forward. Because there might be some things that just on the test day, if they're not fresh in your mind, you will be tired. You will probably not be thinking at your highest capacity because you're so worn out. So just having things fresh in your mind is super important.
I actually, oh,
Go ahead, Isha.
sorry. I was just gonna say I actually took my MCAT during my gap year, and I just took it during the summer, and I think that's also a good time as well. I think sometimes people mention that you need to take it earlier, and it could be good to have that earlier test date. But if you're not able to fit it in, it's really no rush to do it in the spring. I think just do it whenever you feel most prepared. So I took it right after graduating when I had some more time to focus on the MCAT after classes were over. So the summer is also a good time, I feel like, and typically you can know like what you're going to score based off the practice exams. So I think that could really guide your school list if you're applying that same year. And that's kind of what I did is I knew what the range was and where I could possibly apply with that specific score. And then whenever you get your MCAT score back, hopefully you can get it back typically around the August time or whatnot. And that's when the secondaries are released anyway. So that's still a good time. If like you do really well, you can still send a primary off to a school. And if you don't do as well as you maybe had hoped, you don't have to waste the money to send a secondary to a school that maybe will not accept you with the MCAT score. So I think summer is also, yeah, a good time.
I took mine in the summer as well. I took it like maybe sometime near the end of June, but that was like after I had changed my date a couple times. So I say this because I originally had a date in like early May and like started studying around April for it. But that's like the good part of kind of having an earlier date. If you don't think that you're ready, then you can like change your date and like move forward. So that's like one of the things that I did. And in terms of studying, I think it's very individualistic. So if someone tells you this works for them, it might not exactly work for you. And that's something that I definitely struggled with in the MCAT. I had to kind of figure out how I like to study. So it really is a little bit of like, how do you learn best with flashcards? Do you learn best just by reading? It's kind of like figuring out what your specific study style is and catering your MCAT with that.
Yeah, I also took mine in May, and something that I don't know if you guys know, but the sooner you apply for the MCAT, you kind of get to pick your date. And if you do it later, then you just kind of get stuck with whatever. So if you take the test better in the morning versus the afternoon, that's going to play a factor as well. So maybe you're a morning person and you want to get it over with, or you're kind of a night person. And so just about whenever you fill out your application is going to limit your access to certain dates. So that's just something to keep in mind, as well as making sure my biggest advice is make sure you take full length practice tests like you would the actual test, because like they said, it's a really long test and it can really, like, you feel exhausted and your brain wants to stop often. So making sure that you get yourself into that environment and familiarizing yourself with the attrition that's going to come with that test is going to be really helpful for you to keep going on test day. And practice tests are really helpful, so I agree.
Yeah, I can add to what Brandon said about the tests. They're really helpful if you do the full length test, especially like I remember my test date because it was kind of traumatizing, honestly, March 26th. But it was on a Friday. So like every Friday leading up to it, I took a full length practice test, like in the same time that I would have taken the actual test. And that really helped prepare me for how grueling it would be. So if you can get access to those practice tests, the AAMC has their own, but there's a lot of other study sources that have their own as well. So just as many as you can do, that's really the best way, I think, to prepare for it.
So I actually took the test twice. So I would say don't be afraid to take the test twice, but also be prepared the first time you take it. I tried to take it in January thinking I could study over Christmas break for it, and that was not my best decision. So I ended up taking it again in May, and it went better because I had more time to study. So just make sure you're prepared the first time. push it back if you need to. Don't be afraid to do that, and don't be afraid to take it again.
I actually did the same thing with mine, and I can agree that it was not a good decision.
I will say with taking, sorry, I thought there was a question in the chat. I can answer that question.
Yeah. Here, I'll read it out that way for the recording. People can make sure they hear it. So yeah, we have a question. Is it really necessary to pay like $1,000+ for those test prep programs, or is it feasible to study in cheaper ways?
I can answer that. I did not buy anything other than I bought like 2 or 3 AMCAS like practice tests, but I didn't buy anything for the MCAT. I was very like, I had a lot of friends who were older. They had a lot of hand-me-down books. I used that a lot, but I knew kind of going in that like if I could save money, I would. And it, once again, like it really is about like how you study. Like I used these books that my friends gave me, and that was enough for me, and I was able to like do that. But like some people need more of like a guided approach, and that's where the practice, like the online resources and like test prep programs come into play. So I will say like you don't necessarily have to buy the test prep program for the MCAT, and I actually did the best whenever, because I took the MCAT like more than once as well, and I did the best whenever I was like using more of my free resources other than like a test prep program.
I will say the thing that I would say is 100% worth buying is like I think it's the AAMC has like 4 full-length practice tests or something. And so for me, I also got books from people as hand-me-downs, and like I think it depends on your personality a lot. Like if you need the extra push of like, okay, I put this much money into it, like someone's holding me accountable, I think it can be great to do one of the programs. But for me, I just use like the books to kind of help guide me and like show me what areas needed to focus on more. But then the full-length practice tests, like those were extremely helpful, and the ones from the AAMC are definitely better than like I think I had some with Kaplan or something, and they just like made me feel really bad about myself. And the AMC ones were a lot better.
For me, I also use the Kaplan ones, but like Emma was saying, they are considerably harder, and you do feel horrible. And that's just what I needed to like see that score and be like, we got to change something. So that was kind of a negative reinforcement for me, was seeing that, knowing that score, knowing that I didn't want that score, and then prompting me to study more. And then you get to test day and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Kaplan just made it seem a lot harder than it was. And so I don't know, for me, that's what helped me a lot.
I think another resource, I don't know how it wasn't popular when I was taking the MCAT, or wasn't as popular, but Anki, which is a flashcard thing, you can usually find a bunch of pre-made decks, and you can kind of tailor it. There's a little bit of a learning curve as far as getting it to work for you. But there's a lot of add-ons, and it's free. And there's a lot of pre-made decks that are being updated constantly, so it has all the most recent information on it. I use Anki now for step 1 and step 2, and I'm sure there's plenty of decks for the MCAT as well. So it's a free resource, and there are practice questions, but if there's like rote memorization that you need, flashcards are good for that.
Getting the Anki learning curve out of the way before you get into medical school is also really helpful, because I use it constantly in medical school, and it's so helpful.
Okay, I'll add on to this question as well, and then I think we can probably, unless there's more, I heard someone speak up. Certainly there are, obviously it sounds like tons of ways that you can study for the MCAT without having to pay like the thousands and thousands of dollars. Actually, in making this presentation, I think like the algorithm of the internet, I don't know, it like knew I was doing MCAT stuff for these slides. And now anytime I go on YouTube, every single ad is like the Princeton Review MCAT thing. It only costs $3,000, but guaranteed 513 or higher. And I was like, okay, come on. I didn't do that. I kind of use a lot of my undergrad lecture materials, anything kind of passed down. There was one site that I use, I've been trying to find it. It's called MCAT-prep.com. I think it was like the most bang for your buck, to sound like a dad here. It was the most bang for your buck. It was about, I think, $40 a month. It had like review videos, it had practice questions, and then it had full practice tests you could do for like $10. So I thought it was good. The website was kind of janky, but in terms of content review, it was good. But the practice tests, like the actual AMC ones, are like, that's gold standard. That's really what's going to be most helpful. All right. Anything else about the MCAT? Any questions about the MCAT?
It is one of the hardest tests you will ever take, so don't think that like, oh, like this should be easier for me. It was definitely like, I think even in med school, like it's still been, I'm only a first year, but it's still the hardest test I've taken.
Yeah, it's certainly the combination of the scope of what could be on it, the length of the test, and really the amount of critical thinking that you need to do on it. And obviously cars, that whole thing is critical thinking. I mean, they give you a passage over something you've never heard of before, and you kind of have to interpret that and analyze it. But the bulk of the test, you need a tiny amount of background knowledge on what you're reading, but a lot of it is just what is this telling me? What is this pathway that this table or this chart is showing me? How can I sort of make sense of that and apply it to what I know? So it's a lot of critical thinking, and you're only really going to get that by doing the practice tests. So that's why we keep kind of hammering that home. It's always the best thing to do. So in case anyone's not aware of how the MCAT is scored, this is being recorded, so in case anybody isn't sure. So each section that we said is going to be graded anywhere from 118 to 132. I don't know why they score it this way, but the median is going to be like a 125, the average right here. So this is your bell curve, and if you look over here actually at OU's numbers specifically, this is from like this year's class. I got this from the OU College of Medicine website. You can see the average GPA, average science GPA. So that's really just like your biochem physics, like stuff like that. Our average MCAT score was about a 508. Now that's average. Some people scored way better than that, and some people didn't score as well. And that's okay. The MCAT is one tool that admissions committees use to look at you as a person. We have tons of schools, tons of majors represented. We have a pretty diverse class. Just to put it kind of in perspective, a 508 average MCAT for OU specifically here at the Oklahoma City campus, that's about, my little Zoom thing is covering it, but I'm pretty sure it's about a 70th percentile. So you don't have to score perfect on the MCAT. Obviously do as well as you can, because every school is different. You want to tailor your target MCAT score with whatever school you're really wanting to get into. But here at OU, like we said, it's not the end all be all. People have scored less than a 508 and gotten into medical school here and been fantastic med students, been fantastic doctors. So it's not the end of the world if you don't score as well. Certainly try to score as best as you can. But just so you guys know specifically for our school what it looks like, I thought it'd be good to put some numbers there. All right, let's jump into AMCAS now. So this is actually applying after you've taken the MCAT. For our little timeline up here, again, the best time to get into AMCAS is when it opens up in May. I think for us, like for me, it's been a while. I think it opened like start of May. And it was open for you to fill out your application, go through all of these different sections that you can see here. And then right when June hit, that's when you could submit it and allow schools to actually see everything. One quick note about the MCAT going back. If you do the MCAT, you should expect to get your score back in about a month. It takes about a month for it to come back. So just timeline wise, I know there's a lot of moving parts, just so you're aware of that. But really you can do AMCAS beyond June after, it kind of opens up for all the med schools. There are tons of people who are still working on their AMCAS, still working on all of these things in their primary application through like October, and that's fine. A lot of med schools will do admissions on a rolling basis. So we usually recommend you get it in as soon as possible, right when June hits. That way, you can be kind of the front runner and have more options, more spots available to you. But it's okay. If you feel like your application is not ready, you don't have to submit it right then and there. That's why, we're here as mentors. It's why, anybody on campus who can help you kind of gauge when you want to submit, that's always a good thing. So let's go into some of these sections of AMCAS, starting with coursework. So at least when I did it, we had to send our transcript for the university, any community college class that you've taken, as well as like your high school AP or IB courses. You have to send all of those transcripts to AMCAS. I think I did it all electronically, but it may need to be paper. There's like guidelines on that on AMCAS. I think there's a little link on the PowerPoint that I'm going to be sending out that kind of lists more things about that. But I had to get the transcripts, and then I had to enter my courses using an unofficial transcript, like word for word, like letter by letter, verbatim. I'm not sure if they still do that. Okay, I see Hootie is nodding her head, so it sounds like they might still do that. But yeah, you have to send it and then also type it out yourself, which is really fun. But that's kind of how it is, and they want to see all of it, every single class. So if anyone has any more advice or things to talk about for coursework and transcripts, just going to open it up now.
I would say just whenever you are entering all your like courses and everything, maybe like double check, because I had like a ton of courses, and I think after like spending like an hour or two, I like my brain was like all foggy, and I was sure I like fat fingered something, and that was gonna make my GPA like a 1.0 or something. So just double check that maybe like the next day, or come back to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, I was gonna say I don't know if you had to specifically get like high school transcript. Is that what you mean with like the AP from high school, Eric? I don't. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I turned in a high school transcript. If any of y'all did, who's like a first year, maybe I'm just remembering wrong.
I think you might have to input like AP credit that you got, not necessarily a class that you took.
Okay, then I think that's what it was. You don't have to like get a high school transcript if anybody was confused on that, but yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Like I said, it's been a couple of years since I've done it, so maybe I didn't end up doing that. But I do remember needing AP courses in there because that counted for things in college, obviously. Like I think my calculus carried over or something. So all right. Any questions about transcripts or courseworks, how that works? It's pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure you get them all in. And the devil's kind of in the details when you're putting it in, like we said. Every course has to be written out exactly like your transcript, and AMCAS uses that to calculate your science GPA, which is a pretty key metric when med schools are looking at your overall application. So when you're putting this in, just make sure, you really, really check it, very detail oriented.
I was gonna say if any of y'all are applying to Texas, Texas makes you turn in like ACT scores and like things that you forgot existed. So if any of y'all are applying to Texas, I had to deal with that, and I was like, I don't remember what my ACT score was. So heads up if you're applying.
Yeah, great note about Texas. So AMCAS, if in case anybody doesn't know, AMCAS is its own entity for most MD schools. Texas, if you're applying to any MD school, and I think DO school in Texas, you have to go through a separate application. That's TMD SAS. I remember doing that too because I actually grew up in Texas. And it's basically the same process, all the same stuff, but you have to do it just for Texas schools, which is really fun.
It's not all Texas schools, I believe, because I think I applied to Baylor and possibly UT Southwestern. I can't remember the exact schools that I didn't need to do the Texas application with. So it's not all Texas schools.
All right. So moving on to the next section of AMCAS, this is the work and activities section. So basically anything like kind of extracurricular, volunteering, work experience, research can go in here. I think when I did it, it was basically you give a little paragraph or a little blurb about each of these things. I think for us, they had 10 max that you could do. And then I think 3 of those you could designate as your most meaningful experiences. Is that still the same for y'all first years who did it? Okay. So yeah, what you put on here can be medically or not medically related. That's okay. Even your most meaningful things doesn't have to be medically related. As long as it shows kind of your leadership, your teamwork ability, your commitment to medicine or anything else, passion, anything. Basically, your personal characteristics that kind of make you unique. Med schools want to see that. So, does anybody have anything that they want to talk about with this section?
I just wanted to second, you don't have to put a medically related thing as your most important experience. You want to kind of go through this application in like what makes me shine and not like what does the med school want. One of my most meaningful experiences was like a babysitting job that I had. And I put that there because I learned a lot from it and I could speak a lot about it. And it like, I guess like was a way of showcasing my personal strengths. So don't think that you have to do like all the medical things and put only the medical related things on here, because it really is like what makes you stand out and what makes you unique.
Also, you get to do up to, I think, 15 activities. You don't have to fill them all up. Like, I think on mine, I only used like 9 or 10.
All right. Students, any more questions about this section?
I also had another piece of, I guess, advice that I kind of wish I did in college. I never made any lists while I was going through anything of like things that I've been involved in. And I think that would be, especially if you're like junior year-ish age, like getting to that time, making a list of just like everything you've done, because it's easy to forget sometimes in college and when everything's like crazy and all. But like I made a list of all my activities even before the application opened, just and wrote like something small about them because I knew that that was something that AMCAS wanted. So if you want to start preparing early, maybe making a list of all the things you've done so far and like your role would be a good idea.
Yeah, and even to like piggyback off of that, like I think writing all that down and like writing down like what you did helps whenever like, when an interview comes around, you can kind of like talk about like leadership and all of your experiences kind of more in depth and everything.
Yeah, so like a really good helpful tip that I got when I was applying to medical school and then when interviews came around is you need to think about how the things that you've done extracurricularly help to show you have like good attributes for a physician. So something that they said is there's like there's 15 core competencies that you can just like look up on Google of like a good physician that's been lifted out. And so you can go find those 15 core competencies and then use your personal experiences to help highlight those competencies. And those are things that they're going to ask you about in interviews. And those are things that you can talk about in interviews and will be really effective when interviews come around. So that's something that when you're just like going through and starting to think about all the things you've done in medical school, kind of try to see like if you can like use stories from your extracurriculars to highlight a competency.
Related to that, since we're talking about extracurriculars, if you're lacking in one area, like I don't think I really had any volunteer hours in undergrad, but I still showed those core competencies through other means. So even though I didn't have like clinical volunteer experience, I had other experiences that gave me those same skills that I would have gained from volunteering.
All right. Yeah, all good points. And for any students, and if anybody's watching the recording, as you're kind of making your list or going through AMCAS and wondering like, oh, should I put this on like as an experience or is this most meaningful, yada, yada. If you want any advice or, any tips on that, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm happy to help with that. I think most people would be happy to help you with that. We've been through it, so we know exactly what it's like to have all these questions. So please reach out to us, and we'll talk later about specific ways that you can do that. So moving on now to letters of recommendations. This is a pretty significant part of your application. When med schools are looking at you as an overall person, they see everything that you're putting on there, but they obviously want input from others who really know you well. So I looked up stuff on AMCAS for this slide and every slide, but they said that you can have up to 10 letters of rec on your AMCAS application. Now, you don't have to send 10 to every single school. The idea is you have 10 and you can sort of pick and choose which ones work best for specific schools you're applying to. So if you have a really good family friend or connection, or you shadowed someone at a particular school, or they're affiliated with a particular school, you can select that one to go there and maybe not select others. Also, if your school has some kind of pre-med committee, I know TU has one, I'm guessing OSU also has that. A lot of times they will sort of make a conglomeration of like a bunch of letters that professors write about you and make a like packet that has like a cover letter and stuff. Each school is kind of different, but if you're not sure if your school has that, then reach out to the pre-med committee or to the pre-med organization or any of your like pre-med coursework professors, and they'll be able to help you out. So for our panelists, I want to ask, like, what were some letters of rec that you thought were really good in terms of who you got it from and like what your connection was?
I think for me, my school did have a like pre-med letter writing committee, but I went to a smaller school since I went to OBU and I didn't know about that. So I would say if you don't know if your school has one or not, definitely ask, because that was definitely worth it for me. It made it way easier to just go through one professor instead of trying to like choose like who knows me the best and who's going to give me the best letter. That way they all kind of got to contribute to it and say like their own things. And I'm pretty sure people asked me about that letter in interviews and stuff. And so I think that was a really good one that I had. So I would say definitely ask your professors or like your pre-med committee or whatever at your school, because they may have that option and you just don't know about it.
Along with the pre-med committee, I used a doctor that I worked for a few years with, that I volunteered with, and that was really helpful. And that was a letter that a lot of the interviewers talked about as well. So I think that a community physician or a community advocate that you've worked closely with that can write a letter outside of just your academic abilities is always really helpful, because I'm pretty sure that the OU pre-med committee typically just kind of writes a letter about your academic performance and things like that, and they're not going to necessarily write as much about your soft skills. And I know for a fact that letter writer, the physician, did write a lot more about soft skills and things like that. So I think that was something that was brought up in my interview, and I think it's always really helpful to have letter writers that have written letters before as well. Don't try to use someone that maybe hasn't written a letter before, just because you don't want to be their first letter, especially to medical school. I think that there is sometimes at some schools very little time that they spend on your application. So letters of rec can really set you apart from people that have similar abilities to you and similar MCAT scores and GPAs. So definitely use those letters of rec to your advantage, and try to find someone that you've heard writes really good letters and that you have a somewhat close relationship with, so that they can actually advocate on your behalf, and that know you pretty well.
When's the best time to ask for letters of recommendation?
I always asked if I was going to ask someone that I knew I wasn't going to see until like for a while after shadowing or working with them, before applying. I would ask right after I was done working with them. So I shadowed this doctor. I think it was only for a week total, but I was there like 9 to 5 every day. And at the end of the week, I asked her if she would write me a letter when I was applying, because I felt like I made a good connection with her. And we ended up like doing like a mini interview because she wanted to find out more about my interests and things like that. So I asked then, right after working with her, but if it was someone that I like had a stable connection with, like people I did research with at university or an advisor. Trying to remember the exact timeline. I think I asked them also like right when applications opened in May. I believe that's when I asked. It's been a while.
I asked, kind of had a date that I wanted to send my application. And so I asked like 2 months before that, but I would tell them like it's due in this like considerably earlier, because one of the things that I've seen with a lot of med students is they'll ask for an application or they'll ask for a letter of rec and like won't really give like, you know, like ample enough time. Maybe they ask like a month before or even like 3 weeks before, or they like tell them it's due on insert date the application is due. And I think that is a little, it gave me a lot of anxiety whenever just hearing this secondhand. But I would say like tell them considerable in advance and give them like a date that's earlier than when you want to turn your application in, because then you can have that for sure and like you can like, you know, confirm that it's there instead of on the last day being like, where is my letter, like things like that, because that's something that people have definitely had issues with in the past.
Another thing to consider. Oh, sorry.
No, you go for it.
Another thing to consider, kind of going off of what Jessica and Isha said, is getting a doctor's letter. Not all schools require it, but I remember when I was applying to some DO schools as well, it was required that I had a letter from a DO specifically. So just getting those connections early would always help. If you can shadow both MD and DO if you're applying to both, that's always great, because I had one letter each and I thought that helped my application for sure. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, to kind of wrap up our discussion about letters of rec, the short answer to for me to the question like when should I ask for letters, short answer for me would be the earlier the better. If you know that you're wanting an if you're close with someone and you think they'd be maybe write a strong letter, make sure you say strong letter of recommendation. The earlier the better, because obviously the more time they have, you know, the better they can make that letter and more personalized they can make for you. But also for sure giving them a deadline. Ideally, that's a little bit before when you actually need it is extremely helpful to them as well. You know, you just always want to make sure that you're open with your communication, and you're being considerate of their time as well, because you know it can take some time to get these things done. All right. Another key part is the personal statement. We get usually a lot of questions about this, and it can be something that is brought up during interviews. A lot of times, you know, this is your chance to show how unique you are, what brought you to the field of medicine. And it's just good talking points, you know, for people who are processing, you know, possibly thousands of applications and they're doing hundreds of interviews. So usually the personal statement is wanting you to answer the question, why medicine? Very broad, but you know, it's a good question. And you're going to get asked that during the interviews as well. Obviously, you try to make it unique and memorable without being too over dramatic. You know, you can always have an attention grabber in, you know, kind of your first paragraph. But also you don't want to be like Stephen King, you know, like writing like a full novel or something. So yeah, if your school has like a writing center or something, that could be really helpful. Because you know, as you're typing this thing out, at least for me, when I wrote my first draft of my personal statement, I only had rough ideas of what I wanted to be on there. And then I went back after like a day and I read it and I went, wow, everything on this page is trash. So definitely revise it yourself. But then for me, it was really helpful to send it to as many people as possible. You know, any mentors you have, any professors or physicians that you think would be good, maybe even your letter writers if you think you're that close with them. I had my mom read it like 3 times. You know, friends of mine, anybody can talk about grammar, anybody can talk about the content. So that's always helpful. And I revise mine like 30 times.
Your first draft is never going to be the one that you want, and sometimes you might change completely the topic of your letter to, or not letter, your personal statement as well. I think personal statement is a good time to show things outside of your resume, because your panel or the people who are interviewing you can see your resume. So I would say make your personal statement like maybe not a resume part 2, but more of like a significant moment and like what it means to me, something that like your interviewers can't already see. And then my second personal statement advice would be to make it like, you don't have to make it about like a clinic experience per se. Mine was not about a clinic experience, but like it's very like what makes you you and what makes you good to be a physician. And that can be like a leadership experience. It can be an experience you might have had like with, I don't know, with like a friend or something. Like mine was about working at this education place, the health education place, where I would do like presentations on alcohol health. So that was like what I kind of used, but it wasn't about the health. It was about like a conversation I had with someone after one of these presentations. So making it very unique to you and your personal experiences is a really important.
Yeah, so we've got a question in the chat. If you're applying this upcoming cycle, when's a good time to have the personal statement like final draft by?
I didn't have a final draft until I submitted my application, which I submitted it a little late because my personal statement never felt finished to me. I think I submitted in September the second time. The first time I didn't submit until October, which is way too late for me personally. So that was the very last thing that I worked on before submitting. When the application was opened, I made sure I did all like the nitty-gritty stuff, transcript, experiences, and then I started my personal statement and did revision after revision. And then when that was done, that's when I submitted my application.
I think maybe a month before you want to send in your application, start thinking about having an idea, and like maybe a first very rough draft would be a good idea, at least like a month before, because this is something that's like why medicine is a really hard question to answer usually. So it's something you want to think about. So final draft, honestly, I think my final draft was like a week before I submitted, but like you want to start thinking and like making it first draft a little more in advance, like 1 or 2 months, I would say.
All right. Any other questions about personal statement? It's a pretty broad topic. You know, why medicine, like you said, is really broad, but a lot of people will approach that question in very different ways. You know, I think a lot of us would be more than happy to look over some drafts of personal statements if you want to send it our way. We'll talk a little bit, actually, let's see. Oh, no, we have more to talk about with AMCAS, but then we'll get to that. There's tons of people here at OU who are like signed on, like wanting to help students get into medical school. And personal statement revising is part of that.
If you want to see, I was gonna say, if you wanted to see a personal statement, like I am willing to send mine out if anyone wants. And I feel like a lot of people here would be too.
Mine was really bad, so I probably won't share mine. But I admire you for sharing yours. That's great. The more examples you can see, the better, because you can see like you can take little tidbits, be like, oh, I like that aspect. I like what they did with this paragraph. I'll try to incorporate that. So that's good. And there's tons of examples online. I put a link on the slides, and I'll send out the slides too, so people can see that too. Okay, let's talk quickly about secondary applications as well. So after your AMCAS goes out, say you submit it June or July or August, whenever. Usually, med schools will start seeing it, they'll start processing, and then some of them will automatically just send you back a secondary application. Some of them will look over your application first and then do that. So what's on the secondary applications a lot of times are additional essays. So you did your personal statement, you have all your letters, you got all that done, but they want more. I looked up, these are some of the most common prompts that are going to be on the secondary apps. So one of them is about diversity. It's about your personal experience with it. So, if you've ever encountered either you yourself or if you have seen instances of discrimination or anything like that in the workplace or otherwise, they just want to see you talk about that and your thoughts on that. I think a lot of times the prompt is something along the lines of like, I think it's like, is diversity important to you, and if so, why? Like something like that. There's a lot of times one where it says, "Oh, tell us about a time where you had a significant challenge you overcame." The third can be like, "Why us?" A lot of times it's going to be, "Why our school?" They want to know why you're looking at that school specifically. Leadership, and then just anything else that they want to know. It could be like just free space for anything that maybe you couldn't fit on your AMCAS. There's just stuff that you could put there too. Did anybody have any like interesting secondary application experiences or like essays that you didn't like anticipate having to write, but you did?
I don't remember all the essays that I wrote because honestly, I wrote so many for secondary applications, and this was probably one of my more like frustrating times of like the application process because you've taken the MCAT, you've like sent out all this stuff to all of these schools with your primary application, and then now like literally every single school is asking for 1 to 3 essays that are different from what you've already written. And most of them cannot be applied to like another secondary application. Like, yeah, it's usually like there are some themes, but like you're gonna have to like tweak it to like tailor it to each school. And so like honestly, like I kind of regret how many secondary applications I spent time doing by the fall of my senior year of college. And is like one thing that I would actually reduce. And like I think I was just like scared of like not getting into med school. So like felt like I had to do every single one. But like if you kind of know that like maybe that medical school is probably not for you, then like don't waste your time. And also like every single one that I did, I think apart from OU, I think OU is the only one, required additional money too. So it was like really expensive on top of it. So I would honestly kind of recommend like don't just apply to one school unless that one school is like the only school you'll go to, but like maybe don't do like 15. That's my recommendation there.
Yeah, and also remember that every school you send your AMCAS to, most of them at least, you're gonna have to fill out secondaries for them. And I think I applied to like 15 schools, but I ended up not sending secondaries to like 3 of them just because I was so burnt out from typing essays that I just didn't have the motivation to do anymore.
The most interesting secondary I got was actually OU because it didn't have any essays on it. It was just 5 like yes or no questions and a $50 payment, and that was it. So OU was nice. The rest of them all had essays, and it was awful.
Yeah, you can tell this is our favorite topic for sure. The application process takes a while, and it's a lot of time, effort, and money. Nicole, I'm really glad you brought up the cost because it's something that I kind of forgot to mention earlier. So the MCAT costs a lot. It's like a couple $100. I don't remember how much it is, but it's quite a bit. AMCAS alone, I think to access AMCAS is $175 like processing fee, and that includes one med school. If you want to do more med schools, it's $45 per med school. So that starts to rack up. And then secondary applications, a lot of them like OU will have a $50 secondary application processing fee. So it really does start to kind of rack up. If you're already receiving student loans from a university, you may need to consider taking out a federal loan. Obviously, finances are different for everybody, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. kind of budgeting a little bit for these for all of this application stuff. They like to take advantage of the fact that people really want to get into medical school, so they like to charge a lot of money for it, unfortunately. But yeah, these essays are things that you can anticipate. So, you know, these ones are really common on the slide. Some of them you can't really anticipate though. Like Nicole said, there's some that their prompts are going to pop up and you just don't have anything written down for that. So that takes a little bit of time. But that's again where if you have close friends, if you have mentors, they can kind of help guide you. Obviously, be mindful of their time because it takes a long time to revise these things. But the secondary applications, I think, kind of go unnoticed until you're kind of in the thick of it, and it can be a lot. It's an easy way to burnt out. Any questions about secondary applications and kind of these like additional essays?
I was gonna say, if you don't know about it already, since money was brought up, the AAMC has a fee waiver program thing, where you can like, and it's something that I wish I knew about because I would have definitely used it, but like you can apply to a certain amount of schools for free at and you only have to pay, I think, like, I don't remember what you have to pay, but like it gives you like 20 schools for free with like the application fee, I guess, or something like that. But it is very, very helpful. If you just look up like AAMC, like AMCAS fee waiver on Google, you'll probably find it. But very, very helpful thing to.
Yeah, great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I forget about that, but it is extremely helpful. And again, something that I think MCAS doesn't like advertise it a lot because they're like, no, don't take our money, but you should do it, or at least look into it. You know.
It's the fee assistance program.
All right. I think we'll talk a little bit about interviews. I think we could talk a lot about interviews, but you know, in the interest of time, we'll try to go a little bit quick. So interviews are, I think they're the fun part compared to everything else. Much more fun than writing essays. So interviews, you know, obviously when you submit AMCAS and you do all these secondaries, the earlier the better. Interviews can start going out as early. I mean, I had an interview in August, I think, really, really early. But you know, they go through really the entire like fall semester, and then I think even in January and February you can get interviews as well. And yeah, they're interesting. Some of them are a lot more structured. My interviews were in person. Were y'all's all on Zoom? They were all on Zoom. Okay. Yeah, so that kind of changes things a little bit. But for like OU, for example, they kind of have a weird, for the Oklahoma City campus, they have a half thing. So the first half of the interview is a more structured interview where they go through those AAMC core competencies that we talked about before, and they'll ask you a question where all of them are, tell us about a time when blank. So one of them could be, tell us about a time when you encountered a challenge and how you overcame it. One of them could be, tell us about a time when you were working on a team and things weren't really going well and how you address that, something like that. Those are kind of tough. But if you look at those AAMC core competencies and kind of think of scenarios that can apply to a lot of those, it can really help you out. After that portion, OU will, at least I guess on Zoom, they'd have you go into a separate little waiting room. And that's when they look over the rest of your application. So they look at, because the interviewers haven't seen really anything about you up until this point. They'll look at your personal statement, your MCAT scores, your GPA, everything else, your letters of rec, I think, too. And then they'll bring you back in to the room. And that's a much more informal thing. If they had any concerns by looking at your application, they'll ask you about that. But there's no structure to it. It's really just whatever they want to talk about. They'll just kind of ask you whatever questions come to mind. Other schools may have just structured interviews. Other schools may have just the kind of laid back, non-structured interviews. It really, really depends. I think you can look up some info about these schools online. I know Reddit is a place that people go to. Personally, it kind of scares me. But there are places where you can kind of get some info. And you know, a lot of us have interviewed places too, so you're welcome to ask us as well. Does anybody have any fun interview stories they want to share?
So I'm like Eric. I love a good interview. I think most of the time they're fun, and one of the easiest things for me is just knowing that these are people, and they probably want me to go to their school to some extent. They're like, if they have you there to have an interview, they must be interested in you to some extent. So just realize like they're on your side for the most part. None of them are going to be combative. So it's just them thinking you would be good for the program. This is just you just kind of confirming their suspicion that you're good for the program. So obviously it's important, but don't go in there and build it up as to something that it isn't, because it's really just a good conversation, a good chance for you to show how impressive you are. If you've gotten that far, you're already impressive. I got a little manic in my interview, and me and one of the interviewers got into kind of a shouting match about Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know how that happened. I kind of I blacked out a little bit and then it came to. But having instances, especially in a less formal, structured part of the interview, if they're asking for like, tell us what you do for fun, like they probably already know about your volunteer experience. They probably already know, like, this is a good chance for you to say something that might be interesting to them or something that they haven't heard that day. Like if you teach bulldogs how to skateboard, bring that shit up. Like that's awesome. And they will remember that. So the interviews are a really good chance for you to really express yourself in a way that like things that have been typed up can't. And for them to get a good feel whether your personality would fit into the program as well. And anything that you can do in an interview, especially to kind of stand out, whether it be through having interesting stories, having a good sense of humor, just having a really genuine personality is really important because they see so many people. They get just as like the same fatigue that you have when you're taking the MCAT, they feel just interacting with people, asking them, so tell us about why medicine. Like it is an exhausting process for them. So being able to bring a little levity to their day can really go a long way. So just allow yourself to be comfortable in the room and like know that you guys are both on the same team. They want you to come to your school as much as you want to go to their school. It's just a matter of making sure that you guys are both a good fit. And if you feel like you have a bad interview, maybe it's them, and maybe that's a program representative of a program that you may not want to go to. So if you feel like the interview didn't go bad, maybe it's not you, maybe it's them, and that just indicates that this isn't the school for you, and you'll find a better school next time.
I'm just gonna comment. Oh, sorry. Okay, I did do the multiple mini interview style. I don't know if they're still doing that now that it's Zoom. If anybody has questions about that, they can like reach out to me and I'm more than happy to talk them through that. OU does not do that, and I don't think OSU does either. So if you're planning state, you shouldn't have to worry about it. But multiple mini interviews is like a little bit different because you're just gonna like walk into rooms and kind of get thrown into situations and just they want to see how you adapt. But like some things I got during that was one was honestly just talking to someone for 15 minutes and seeing if you could hold a conversation, which was not, it's harder for them than others, but like honestly, like that's what you're going to have to do a lot during medical school. So that was one, and you can't like really prepare for that, but it was like kind of a cool, interesting like way to get to know someone from that area, whatever the med school that I was at. And then another one that I got was it's like honestly getting like a standardized patient and you had to like pretend that you were giving news, like medical news to this patient, and you're kind of stuck in the room with them for like 10 minutes. And so that can also be kind of hard. So there are kind of some oddball things that I got. And so if anybody has questions about that and thinks they're going to be applying to a school that has multiple mini interviews, and I don't know if they do that anymore since it's Zoom, just reach out to me.
In terms of interview prep, I think one of the best things, if it's not a multiple mini interview, because that's kind of hard to prep for, but if it's just like a standard, like 15 core competency questions interview, there's a lot of practice questions online, and I would highly, highly suggest doing a mock interview with somebody who you think can like give you really good objective advice. That's the thing that I think helped me the most with interviews. And other than that, coming up with like little stories to have to do with the different core competencies. Like one of them is like cultural awareness. So like coming up with a story pre-interview about what you would say for that, I think is super, super important and will help you out.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Hadia said. I think what helped me the most is I would just get my friends and I would grab them and say, you're going to sit down and you're going to make me feel really uncomfortable during this interview. Here's some questions to ask me, just run me over the fire. And that was really like, I got to have some fun with my friends doing it, and it helped me figure out ways out of a lot of uncomfortable situations and just talking. So I would recommend doing that, like Hadia said, like with your parents or with your friends or with your professors. Like, just if you're comfortable and close with that person, just go for it. It'll help you out and maybe create some fun memories. Another thing, like Hadia said, I would go through that core competency list on AAMC and have like 1 or 2 stories just in your pocket that you can swing any way. So one story might be good for one competency, but you used it for a different competency. So then you got to swing your other story to fill it. And so it's just trying to figure out how to match the repertoire of stories that you have in your arsenal to best describe you and to um, emulate what they want to see. So just making sure that you're comfortable with those stories, I think, is important.
Also, make sure you research the school you're interviewing at before the interview. Every school I interviewed at during the interview, they asked me, why do you want to go to school here? So it's helpful if you know a thing or two about their program and maybe what facilities they have, especially if you're interested in a specialty and they have a facility for that specialty.
Also, maybe have some like questions you can go to at the end of the interview when they ask you like, do you have any questions about our school? It's like good to show interest to have like 2, maybe 3 questions about that school.
All right. Any other questions about interviews? Again, this is kind of a topic that really varies a lot, but you know they can be kind of fun, and it's a good way for you to get the vibe of a school and for the school to kind of see your personality outside of what's just kind of listed on paper. All right. So I put this slide here just in case there are any other questions over things that we haven't talked about yet. I think we've touched on a lot of really great stuff, but if anybody has any questions about anything, please drop them in the chat. On the left here, I put a QR code. So AMCAS, like the AAMC, is actually having another webinar kind of like this, guiding students through how to apply and what that looks like. I put that there in case anybody's interested. And then a lot of the things I used as a reference for making the slides and kind of just like refreshing myself on the overall application process. It's kind of like an AMCAS like FAQ page, which I put here on the right. So really quickly, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to go ahead and share something that I'm really excited about. So Rev-Up is a program on campus here at OU where it is a med school readiness program that specifically is trying to help students from disadvantaged backgrounds get into medical school, but they offer a lot of great mentorship and resources for a lot of students. And they have mentors a lot like who's on the panel here. So to sort of expand on that, me and Sarkar, who I think was on the call, I'm not sure if he's still here, we created this thing called the OU Mentorship Portal. So this is through Rev-Up, but it's open to anybody. Any undergrad student can go onto this website and basically browse for current OU student mentors. Everybody on this site, I'll go ahead and pull it up here if I can. We'll see. Is that showing up? I'm not the best with Zoom. This is showing up okay? Okay, awesome. So this is the site. It's a little Google site. It's not perfect, but you know, we put some work into it. But basically, if you are wanting to get in touch with a current OU student for anything, say it's like personal statement review, or you have a question about a specialty, or really if you just want some more guidance on how to get into medical school, you can go onto this website and you can try to find somebody. So if I am a student and I know I want to do family medicine, you can go here, you can browse by specialty right here, and you can see some of our student mentors here. So right here is Krista, she's a 3rd year, she's got a bio, she's got contact information, and you can kind of go through and see what school they went to. The pictures are really big, I should probably change that. But here you can kind of see all of these different mentors. Every single person on this website wants to help you get into medical school. And we've even listed here things that they really, specifically want to help you with. So Alexa here wants to help you with MCAT advice, do an informational interview, maybe do like a mock med school interview. I think this could be a really great resource for anybody, who's wanting to get into medical school. And also, even if you're not sure about specialty, but you want someone from your undergrad specifically, you can also filter by that. So we've got a tab here. Let's say you're an OSU student and you want to pair up with someone who also went to OSU. You can go to that page and then find someone here. So Nicole, I'm going to use you as an example if that's okay. And there you go. So you can just go on there and see all the info. You can see what she's happy to help with, and then her email is right there. So I think this would be a really neat resource for anybody wanting to get into med school and connect with us. Everybody on this call, everybody on this website wants to help you. We can't help you unless you reach out and ask for help. So please, 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 don't feel like you're bothering us. We wouldn't be on this website if we didn't want to help you guys. So there's that. I think that is about it. If anybody has any closing remarks or anything, feel free to share. If not, then I think we will. Oh, wait, we do have some questions in the chat. What is your advice for someone with a lower GPA or MCAT score? How can they be a more competitive applicant? Whoever wants to take that.
I kind of think that having some extra experiences in medicine or healthcare can help, because you can kind of talk about why. You can talk about you have some skills maybe that other people didn't because you worked in some healthcare, or it can also kind of help lend to your argument of why you want to be a doctor. And so I think that can help. I think research can help. So having honestly just something that you're passionate and something that you can talk about to a committee and show them that you are how that can apply to medical school and how that can apply to taking care of people, I think would be something that would be really useful. I mean, the medical school is looking for more than just academics. Looking for people who want to take good care of patients. And so that takes more than just academics. And so if you can kind of build those soft skills and show how you're building those soft skills, it's going to make you more attractive as a candidate.
Yeah, and I think if you have a low GPA, I had low undergrad GPA, but I did postgraduate stuff, and I did better there. I was able to talk about how I, did bad, and saw how I could improve, became a better student, and things like that. So just being able to show that improvement, it's kind of like a trend, an upward trend. If you did, do poorly, kind of earlier in undergrad or later, but they can see kind of that improvement. You can talk about that, kind of use that to highlight growth or learning from your mistakes.
All right, and then one final question here. David is wondering if we are wanting to stay in Oklahoma for residency and beyond. And then if not, how feasible is it to match outside of Oklahoma?
So I'm not wanting to stay in Oklahoma. I'd kind of like to go back to Louisiana, but we have a board in the BSEB right now about all the fourth years who matched, and they put a little pin as to where they matched. And the majority of the students didn't match in Oklahoma. So I'd say it's pretty feasible to not have to stay in Oklahoma to match.
Yeah. As a third year student, I can definitely say that I think in medical school, or when they're applying to medical school, lots of times they say, oh yeah, their best chances to get into a state school, and that lots of times getting into state schools is a little bit easier, but with residency, that's really not the same thing. With most of the time people it's very easy to match out of state. And the people, he has a picture of it right there. The people who stayed in Oklahoma, like, wanted to stay in Oklahoma, and the people who left Oklahoma wanted to leave Oklahoma. So like, I think the only like ones where you may have a little bit of a hard time matching out of state would be like the really competitive specialties. And that's just because like, when you're here on your third year rotations, you can like work with that specialty, and like the people who are interviewing you and who you'll be working with in residency, like you can work with them for like a month, and so they can get a really good feel for you. And so they might be more likely to pick you than someone out of state where you might have never worked with them before. But that's really only in like, I think, certain select cases. And I don't think, like, if you want to go out of state, you definitely can for residency.
So yeah, it's certainly feasible to match out of Oklahoma. Hopefully you saw the map that I showed. Tons of people match outside of Oklahoma, and you can actually look up our match data. I think it's on the OU website. They sent it out to us. If you want it, I'll just send it to you, because I think it's really interesting to see where our fourth years match. I would say really if you want to go somewhere, if you work hard and you make connections and say you do an away rotation, you can match there. Especially if you show off, how personable you are and how competent you are as a future doctor in your interview. For anesthesia specifically, just to give an example, I believe we had 15 people match anesthesia this year, which is a lot, and 4 matched here, Oklahoma. Everyone else went out of state. And that's by choice. Everybody wanted to go, based on family, or they wanted to try somewhere else. The people who wanted to match here matched here. So it's certainly feasible. A lot of our students will go all over the country. It's great to see the data. Like, there are people getting to like Rhode Island and like Alaska, like California, everywhere. So yeah, it's if you have it as a goal, you can certainly do it. And same for matching here as well. All right. Any last minute questions? I'll wait a second in case there's any typing. All right, doesn't seem like it. All right, well, thank everybody so much for coming. Our panelists, thank you all so much. I'm gonna clap for y'all. You've been fantastic. Your advice has been really, really wonderful, really helpful. For all of our students, I will be sending out this recording to you all, the PowerPoint slides, and more info on that mentorship portal as well. But yeah, I think that is about it for now. Yeah, if anyone has any final pieces of advice or anything they'd like to say, feel free to. But if not, that's all I've got. All right. Thanks, everybody.